Hello everyone, this is VGTI, and today I will be talking about none other than Half-Life. Now you might have heard of this game series, and maybe you haven't. If you haven't played it, you really should because it's a series of very good first-person shooters with a really solid story and characters. It was made by Valve, and you may know them for things like Steam, as well as the Portal series. If you haven't played Portal either, then what the heck are you even doing right now? On the surface, Half-Life appears to have a pretty typical story of aliens invading Earth and the humans fighting back, but there's a lot more to it than that. These games have very in-depth stories, with a lot of little details crammed into the environments, the enemies, all kinds of different things that if you analyze them, you can find out a lot about the universe itself and how deep it actually is. In the first game, scientists at the Black Mesa Research Facility are messing around with dimensional portals and experimenting, researching a dimension called Xen. But something goes wrong. An accident called the Resonance Cascade happens, and the aliens from this dimension, known as Xen, escape into the facility. You play as Gordon Freeman. He's a theoretical physicist who works at this very same facility. The entire first game involves Gordon going through the facility, killing aliens, and trying to find a way to escape safely. At the end of the game, you come under the contract of G-Man. He offers you a so-called employment opportunity. Now, ask anyone. The G-Man is one of the most mysterious video game characters out there. Practically nothing has been revealed about this guy. We see him in all of the Half-Life games, or at least all of the main games, and he seems to be following Gordon around and surveying his actions. The G-Man himself appears non-human-like in the way he speaks and walks, almost as if he's not used to it. All of the fans have been trying to figure out what the deal is with the G-Man, who he is, who he works for, what his goals are, and part of this video is trying to explain who he is and who are these employers that he's working for. The G-Man appears to have almost like magical powers in a way. We see him do multiple things that defy reality. He can stop time, save people from disasters. He can appear on unplugged TVs. He can contact you via what seems to be telepathic messages. There's all sorts of things that he seems capable of doing, and he appears to be able to follow you no matter where you're going. Before I get into the theory itself, let me kind of summarize the events of Half-Life 2, or rather just a basic plot summary of what's going on in that game. At the end of Half-Life 1, G-Man puts Gordon in a 20-year stasis sleep, only to wake him up 20 years later at the start of Half-Life 2. It appears in the 20 years that Gordon was in stasis, a lot of crap happened to Earth. An evil, multi-dimensional alien empire known as the Combine were able to use the portals that were open in Half-Life 1 from Xen and get to Earth. Apparently the Combine go to multiple worlds by traveling through different dimensions and conquer these worlds and add the population of that world to their own military and power. The people of Earth live under a tight rule of the Combine, ruled by violence and fear. Or at least until Gordon comes along. It seems that it all works out into the G-Man's mysterious plan. Throughout the games, Gordon, as well as different characters such as Alex Vance, Eli Vance, Isaac Kleiner, both of the latter being people who worked at Black Mesa with Gordon, all work together to start an uprising against the Combine and win back Earth. So now that you have an idea of what's going on in Half-Life 2, let me delve right into this theory about G-Man and his so-called employers. I think that the G-Man and his employers are representations of fate, or destiny. They have the ability to see different timelines and see what would happen if certain people took certain actions, They can see the consequences of every action and figure out which timeline or which action is the best to take. Because of this, they can influence the events that take place by making contracts with certain people. After they make these contracts, they do their work and then watch the events unfold. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We start with the Combine. They're the ones who take over Earth in Half-Life 2. Way before the events of the Half-Life series, I think that the Combine made some kind of contract with G-Man and his employers, but they broke the rules of the contract somehow, and because of that, G-Man and his employers were very angry at the Combine. They wanted to find a way to influence events where a person or a group of people could take down the Combine from the inside. This leads them to stringing the events together that take place in Half-Life. The G-Man and his employers found a set of events that they could set off that involved the researchers at the Black Mesa Research Facility, and one very special person, Gordon Freeman. To start off, the G-Man was responsible for whatever happened to the Nylahanth, which is the final boss of Half-Life 1. It's a creature that makes some cryptic comments that could be alluding to it being under the control of the G-Man, being under a contract similar to what Gordon will be under in Half-Life 2. So the G-Man was involved somehow with the Nylahanth. To explain what happened, the Nylahanth's homeworld was invaded by the Combine, just as Earth is in Half-Life 2. The Nylahanth and different aliens escaped to Xen after being invaded by the Combine. This leads to the events of Half-Life 1, where the portal opens on Xen and the aliens escape to Earth. And this is all according to the G-Man's plans. He knew this all was going to happen, and he knew this would all lead to the events of Half-Life 2, where Gordon and the rebels would fight back against the Combine. Now, to really get events rolling, the G-Man started off with Wallace Breen. Wallace Breen was the administrator for Black Mesa as a whole in Half-Life 1, and in Half-Life 2, Breen has now become the so-called leader of Earth because of a deal he made with the Combine, a peace treaty after the 7-Hour War. But what's Breen's role in all of this? Well, G-Man made a contract with Breen, or at least that's what I think. The G-Man told him that if he followed this contract, he would become the ruler of Earth. And Breen, being the person that he is, accepted. He was more than glad. He wanted a chance to be the ruler of Earth if this was even true. So, because of that, G-Man gave Breen specific instructions on what to do with the crystal that he delivered to Black Mesa. G-Man brought a specific type of Xen crystal to Black Mesa and gave Breen instructions to tell the scientists. And these instructions would be what caused the Resonance Cascade, and it would all set the plans into motion. And of course Breen would get his wish to be ruler of Earth, or at least 20 years down the line. So the Resonance Cascade happens, and Gordon does what he does in Half-Life 1, and the G-Man keeps an eye on him. The G-Man and his employers know that Gordon could potentially be the one who will be responsible for the Combine's downfall, which is of course what they want. So they have G-Man keep an eye on Gordon to see if he's worthy of this potential, and when he proves his worth, G-Man hires Gordon at the end of Half-Life 1 and puts him into stasis until Half-Life 2 20 years later when he is needed. The reason G-Man put Gordon into stasis is because he couldn't risk Gordon dying before he was needed, so he kept him safe by putting him into stasis until Half-Life 2. Now, before we go on to what happens in Half-Life 2, there's one thing I need to mention about Half-Life 1, and it focuses on a specific character, Eli Vance. In Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Eli reveals to Gordon that on the day of the Resonance Cascade, right before it happened, the G-Man came up to him and whispered in his ear, "Prepare for unforeseen consequences." This makes us realize that the G-Man had his eyes on Eli. He saw something in Eli, and he knew that he would be important down the line, which he was. He became a rebel leader against the Combine. So the G-Man decided to make himself known to Eli. Now, this made me realize something. The G-Man makes contracts with people to set events into motion, correct? Well, when the Resonance Cascade happened, I think that Eli found the G-Man and made a contract with him. This contract allowed the G-Man to take Alex out of the facility safely, because in episode 2, Eli also reveals that the G-Man was the one who got Alex out of the Black Mesa facility in Half-Life 1 when she was just a child. And he mentions that he should have known that G-Man rescued her for his own reasons, which he did. He knew that Alex would be important 20 years later when she helps out Gordon all the time in Half-Life 2 and its episodes. There's also something that G-Man says in episode 2 when Alex is being healed by the Vortigaunts. He contacts Freeman for the first time since episode 1. And he mentions how he saved Alex from the Resonance Cascade. He got her out of the building and kept her safe. But he mentions that there were naysayers who said that Alex wasn't important and she wouldn't be of use to anyone. This naysayer was implied to be Breen himself, because a picture of Breen flashes behind the G-Man when he mentions this. Breen was against the idea of rescuing Alex. He didn't see the point of it. He thought it was a waste of time, but G-Man knew it wasn't, because he knew she would be important in the future. There's plenty of reasons why I think Breen and Eli are involved with the G-Man, and it's all because of Half-Life 2 when Breen mentions that he knows of the G-Man. He doesn't outright say that, but he mentions that Gordon's contract is open to the highest bidder, and that Gordon doesn't want to talk about this kind of stuff in front of his friends. This implies that Breen knows quite a bit about the G-Man, or has had contact with him. And then in episode 2, Eli outright states that he has been spoken to by the G-Man, and that the G-Man was responsible for saving Alex in Half-Life 1. Now we move on to Half-Life 2. Gordon is brought out of stasis 20 years later, and that's when Gordon realizes that the Earth is under control by the Combine. But Gordon quickly hooks up with Alex and Eli and Kleiner and all of his old friends, and he starts the revolution that will topple the Combine and severely cripple their might on Earth. This is all going according to the G-Man and his employer's plans. They're very angry at the Combine for breaking their past contract, and they want to destroy the Combine via Gordon. And it seems to be working very well, or at least so far. The thing we have to realize about G-Man and his employers is that they can see the outcomes of whatever happens. They can see the different branching paths of different decisions, so they know what is the best decision. They can see and understand things that we don't know about. And this leads us to episode 2. Now, spoiler alert, you all know that I talk freely about spoilers in my videos, because usually theories involve spoilers and plot details. So spoiler alert if you haven't played episode 2. And if you haven't, go play it. Anyways, in episode 2, Eli dies. He dies at the very end of the game. And before this, G-Man actually contacts Alex in the middle of the game, just before she's healed, and tells her to relay a message to her father. The message? Prepare for unforeseen consequences. It's exactly what G-Man said to Eli in Half-Life 1. Alex tells Eli this later in the game, and he's visibly shocked by this, and probably pretty terrified too. Eli is killed moments later by 2 advisors. My theory is this. I think Eli Vance had to die. Remember how I said G-Man and his employers can see the outcomes of all actions and figure out which action or course of action would be the best to take? Well, I think G-Man and his employers figured out a way for the downfall of the Combine to go even smoother. But for this to happen, Eli had to die. So G-Man set it up that way so that Eli could die. And he even warned Eli, maybe just to mess with him. I don't know. Eli took the warning as a warning to be careful with the Borealis, but I think it was a warning just to mess with him and show him that he was going to die soon. But either way, I think for the downfall of the Combine to go most beneficially, Eli had to die. We haven't seen the consequences of his death just yet because there hasn't been an Episode 3 or Half-Life 3 yet. But whatever it is, it'll be beneficial to the Rebels, even if they didn't want Eli to die. Remember how Eli said he wanted to destroy the Borealis and whatever was in it, while Kleiner wanted to use it? I think that the Borealis shouldn't be destroyed, and that G-Man and his employers know this. If they want the Combine to really be destroyed, then the Borealis has to survive. Eli wanted to destroy it, and G-Man probably knew that the Rebels would follow his lead and destroy it. But that couldn't happen. So he made it so that Eli would die. I think that is primarily the reason why Eli had to die, was because the Borealis can't be destroyed, and that the Rebels probably have to use whatever is inside it. If they want to take the Combine down, that is. So that's my theories regarding the G-Man. To sum up my theories in a quicker way, let me just recap. I think the G-Man and his employers are representations of the forces of fate and destiny, and that they have the powers to see the outcomes of all decisions and all actions and figure out which one would be the best. And to influence these courses of action, they make contracts with different people who will be important. People like Breen, people like Eli, and especially people like Gordon Freeman. I also think that Eli made a contract with the G-Man to save Alex in Half-Life 1. And, finally, I think Eli had to die, because the Borealis probably can't be destroyed, or the downfall of the Combine might not even happen. So that's my theories regarding Half-Life and the G-Man. There might be more Half-Life theory videos down the line, especially if Episode 3 or Half-Life 3 come out, but that's just wishful thinking. I want to believe. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a comment, tell me what you think, subscribe, like the video, all that jazz, or go about your business, and look forward to the next video.